Okay, so this is the River Runners Oral History. We're here on the Stanton Photo-match trip. We're with Bob Rigg, and it's September 10th, 1994. And we're at Eminence Break.
I need more on you. I'm sorry to stop.
I guess where we ought to start is, well, how about if you tell us who you are and give us a brief resume of your river running career, and then we'll backtrack from there a little bit.
You bet. Well, we're really excited about being on this trip. I didn't plan on coming on to with you folks until Tad Nichols called me sometime around the 26th of August. Between then and about the 5th of September, it was kind of hectic getting everything ready and flying out of Alaska, getting a boat down for them to work on, Brad Dimmock and others. But it's just really a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you so much for it. As for my past history, my resume, not from the river standpoint,
yeah,
I think that we'd have to start back about 1940, I suppose, when Norm Nevels was in Grand Junction and showed us movies of one of his river trips. He had been a guest at our home, actually, as I recall. Stayed there, I believe, one night. But the Nevels came to Grand Junction from Mexican Hat. They knew my father, mother, and that was really the initial thing. I was, 10 years old, I suppose. After the war, my brother was in the flying business at Walker Field in Grand Junction. He and Nevels became good friends. My brother Jim Rigg Jr. worked with Nevels in the 1949 season. They ran the Green, San Juan, and of course the Colorado. I'm not sure they ran the Cataract or not that year, but irrespective of that, following Nevels' tragic plane crash in September of 1949, there was considerable discussion and to-do about who and what might take over the river expeditions. There was a lot of support for Frank Wright and Jim Rigg to do that, and through the winter months after the plane crash, they got together and decided to go ahead and make a run at it and take over the Nevels estate as far as the river running part was concerned. That was by then, of course, spring of '50, and we built 3 cataract boats and became involved in running the river at that time, and that was my first opportunity to go on the river trips. I had been with Nevels. I hadn't been with him, but I did some logistics things for them in a '49 split mountain run, and I'd flown his airplane back for work in 1949 after when they took off from the Grand Canyon. I'd flown up to the Grand Junction to get some repair work done on it, maintenance. So we knew the Nevels. I knew the Nevels. Jim, of course, was a very close friend of Norm Nevels. At least I feel he was a very good friend of his, and they thought alike in many ways. So that's how we started.
Jim and Norm were a lot alike?
Just daring, great guys. I mean, they attracted a crowd. They were just good people. You know, people liked to follow them around.
And I guess they obviously liked each other.
I think quite a bit, both because of the aviation relationship in which they were, Nevels, for instance, plane being worked on in Grand Junction at various times, and Jim helping with passengers and working with them for a year. They became very good friends.
So your first trip was actually not until after Nevels'
That's correct. I did not make any river runs or any river trips until 1950. Started in May of 1950. Tad Nichols, who was on this trip, was with me on the first river trip down the San Juan that I made, and he and I sort of bunked together in those times and became river running companions, as far as Tad was usually on my boat. And we made 4 trips down the San Juan that year, and then the Grand Canyon trip in 1950. And a post-season trip was the taking of a group of starlets down from Height to Mexican Hat, or Height to Lee's Ferry, for the purpose of making a Hollywood short story, River Goddesses. And that's incidentally where Georgie White brought the River Goddesses to Height. We helped get them out there from Blanding to Height, and that was a lot of fun too. And I'm not sure. I guess the film was released, but that was kind of a post-season event for 1950. And from then on, we were fairly busy, fairly occupied in the river running until I guess 57 or 58.
So the title of that was The River Goddess?
Yeah, River Goddess. And I'd love to get a picture of it.
I wonder who do you think might have a copy of that?
Well, Irish McCullough was the real star on that post-season trip, and I think she has been looking for a copy of it, been trying to secure one. She probably more than anyone else to have access to that type of information, because she was later on was the pinup queen of the country here for I guess 2 years, and she's an accomplished painter in her own right. She lives in Prescott, incidentally. We hadn't seen each other, touched base until from 1950 until a year or so ago, and through a mutual friend, Dr. Gus Scott, we came in contact. I can't tell you much about Irish because I really don't know. But anyway, River Goddess is the movie.
We should cover a little bit of your childhood. Where did you grow up?
Way back when?
Yeah, and how far apart were you from Jim? And
well, there were three brothers. My brother Jim was the oldest. He's 6 years older. My brother Jack was four and a half years older, and myself. We grew up in Grand Junction, Colorado. We were all born in Nebraska. My father was back in Nebraska in school, and we ended up back, though, in Colorado, where he had come from. And we lived in Grand Junction, Colorado all our lives, and continued to do so until about 1976 when my wife and I moved to Alaska, where we now reside. Mm-hmm. I attended several different colleges for that, and one of those is the reason we ended up running the Wind River in 1951. We were on the race up there in 51. But we've all migrated back to Grand Junction. Interestingly, Jim went to medical school, as did I, and I think that's one thing that we probably had to divert from running rivers, and with dams coming, we ended up going into medicine. But I don't consider myself a physician. I consider myself a river runner. I consider myself a river rat yet.
Well, when you took over the business, Mexican Hat, were you thinking along the lines of maybe you would do that forever, or was it really just something that you'd do for a while?
Well, I don't know that I could really answer that. You know, I think Jim was probably more prone to consider doing it forever. I think he really was, and he would have done it. And for some reason, with the advent of the dam and other things, and pressures for education, why we sort of diverted from the love that we really had, which was river running and flying. Jim was a professional pilot, ran the Rigg Aviation Service in Grand Junction, and we built the Chris Craft cabin cruisers there and ran those for about 4 or 5 years down the canyon. And so I think our first love was certainly the outdoors and the canyons. And he loved it greatly, as I did, and my brother Jack also was with us on a couple trips. So we were quite river-oriented family as far as running rivers at the time. We also had the other advents of our family. Besides education, we were all involved in the uranium exploration, as was everyone during the boom days of the early 50s. So that took us into this river country, and as you may not be aware, but Neville's and Jim and some others did some prospecting, as it were, uranium prospecting before Neville's died together. But,
no, I wasn't.
A lot of
aware.
Things that.
What were they thinking there? Just that they you might find some uranium and strike it rich?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the hot spot of the country down towards that part of Utah, and the Colorado River Basin, along the Green and the Colorado, out of Moab and Green River.
Where did the pressures for education come from?
Well, I think we're just indoctrinated towards that. We came from a professional family. My father was a physician. My mother and father both graduated from college, obviously. And we just expected that you would go to school, which was the right thing to do. I don't think it's wrong at all. I think it was the right thing to do. But then you always want to do more, so you go to school, or you go to postgraduate school or whatever, and eventually go to medical school.
So how did you guys end up phasing the business out of your lives?
Well, I think we just quit. I think we just stopped. And I've often wondered about that, how and why we did. It was about the time I graduated from medical school, actually in '58, and then with an internship and a residency, well, it just was very difficult to get time to do these kind of things. We just didn't have it. And we knew the dam was going to shoot the works anyway, and we were just not, I guess we just didn't persevere. We just quit. Went on to other things. Flying and work and families. Jim had a big family, I did too, and just went on.
How many trips did you end up doing down here with them?
Well, that's been a question that I really can't answer exactly. I made 5 trips by the time I was 21, starting in 19, and we doubled in 51 and 52, 53, 54. We made at least 2 trips a year in those. Incidentally, that was a never before done thing. Nobody had ever made 2 trips before. We made 2 trips in 1951. A paradigm was that 1 trip through the Grand Canyon was enough. You know, which is of course ridiculous. We made the speed run in 51. Made a commercial run in 50. Let's start off there. The speed run in 51 and June 9th and 10th. Then we ran the commercially later on around the 1st of July in 52 and 51. 52, we built the power boats that year and went down in power boats in May 25th of 1952, and we went through in about 4.5 days, and that was just sort of a shakedown cruise for the power boats. We had never even had them in the water when we took off, and we assumed they'd float and run fine, and they had. I think it was a great event. Power boats in high water, you can have a lot of fun, and you can move down the river conveniently, just like you do here. I think we're all basically lazy, like boatmen are lazy. We don't like to pull on the oars any more than you have to, and if you can do it easier by the mechanical means, why so much the better. But we made a number of years in there. We made double trips with the power boats. Frank Wright was primarily involved with the cataract boats. Jim and I were primarily involved with the power boats. And 1 year we took 3 power boats down or 2 years I guess we did, with my brother Jack. So it was just kind of a family thing, and we ran the power boats and had a wonderful time.
Sounds wild. I remember seeing, I know Katie Lee, she was good buddies with, she is, I mean, I just saw her like not 2 weeks ago.
Is that right?
Yeah. Actually, I saw her last week. She was good buddies with my granddad before he died.
No kidding. Now, Katie went down with us. I think she came down or hiked down and was a friend of maybe Tad Nichols or somebody. And
that's who it was.
She was a fixture on some of the trips for a while, and a great gal and a wonderful ballad singer.
Boy. Jeff, is this sounding okay to you?
Yeah, it is, bro. It sounds right.
God, I don't know why, but I'm hearing just that little tiny breakup. It's making me mad.
His levels are just right at 0 or under.
I just don't know. Well, let's just keep going. It might just be these headphones or something. Well, I remember seeing, she had movies of you guys going in the power boats. And
Is that right?
Yeah,
I've never seen some of her movies. I think she has some shots that I'm sure that I've never seen.
Well, they were amazing. I swear, she has you guys going through Lava Falls, and those boats are getting airborne. And to think of you guys down here all by, what was it like to come down here? Did you even see anybody when you?
We did occasionally see people. We passed Marston. He was at the Frank M. Brown inscription. Matter of fact, I think that's the trip in which they found it in 51. We didn't see anybody else on the speed run. You would occasionally see. I doubt that we saw people more than 5 times, 3 times maybe. I remember, I think one of the last trips, I saw Georgie White go by. Now, that might have been with Staley's trip, perhaps in '65.
Well, did you guys ever think about? Did you ever have much trouble?
You know, I think we're just extremely fortunate. We really never had any trouble. Knock on wood. We're still on the river. We really never had any problems. We never upset a boat. We never really dinged one hardly. We've hit a couple of rocks, very minor things that I know of from some of the boatmen, but virtually never did we have any problems. I know of no problems. It was we lined to some of the rapids on our speed run. We didn't line anything, of course, but it was a kind of a paradigm again that you looked at hants very carefully, because you might need to line hants depending on the level of water, although we ran it certainly too. I'm talking cataract boats. Lava Falls, the only time it was run was when Jim and I ran it on the speed run. But all the rest of the time we lined things like that. We did line the rapids, but we really weren't. We had no difficulty or no problems ever.
I'm blowing that shot, aren't I? Damn. Sorry. Well, if you'd have had trouble, did you? I guess you didn't. Did you spend much time thinking about what you would do if a problem arose or anything, or was it scary for you to come down here?
Well, I don't know. We called it Ulcer Gulch, but
you mean the gorge, or?
Yeah, we kind of referred to it like that sometime. But sure, you get the butterflies and the dry mouth when you run rapids, and it really is a challenge. But it's there, and you want to go out and do it. You want to go out and try it. You know, we were excited about things and excited about life, and any kind of a challenge that you could get to was worth taking, and we did. And we were Frank and Jim were great leaders together, and I think Jim and I did a great job together. But it was he just went out and did it, and full speed ahead. You know, we had all the lines from Danger River memorized, I suppose, and quoted those things. Or
now, what was this? Where did Danger River come from?
Well, that was a Neville's trip of 1942. A very dramatic trip, very dramatic photography and editing to make it look really, really bad. And it was a true trip, but it was certainly editorialized into make it the most dangerous river in the world. Okay. And I won't say that it's not, because it is.
Now,
a great one.
Now, this speed run deal, how did that come up, well, how did that come up?
River runners never do anything till the last minute, just like this trip. I was not going to come down here until the last, just literally 2 or 3 days before I came down. I just wasn't going to do it because I had work and family and things that were more important, it seemed like. And the speed run was a similar sort of it was referred to as a lark by the Rigg brothers. Well, it really wasn't. I was in school, I believe, at Boulder, and I'd been in Casper College the year before. But anyway, I knew about a river run up there, a race on the Wind River. And this was in 1951. A Memorial Day race on the Wind River in Wyoming was to be the last race on the Wind River before the dam was built. And we were veteran river runners. Cataract boats were indomitable. We couldn't be defeated, as far as running rapids. And they talked about this white water, and it sounded wonderful, so it sounded really great. I called Jim, told him about the thing going up in Casper, Wyoming. There was a Wind River race. Let's go run it. So Jim and picked up a boat, a cataract boat, and we met in Casper and drove up the Wind River. A classmate of mine from college, Johnny Harper, who's been a veteran river runner on these trips down here. John Harper's another person you really ought to talk with. But anyway, we went to the Wind River. I arrived there late in the afternoon, a cold Memorial Day weekend, put the boat in the water and ran the sequence of the race to see what the water was like. And I think that's the closest I've ever come to dying of hypothermia, but we didn't know what it was then. We just thought it was just being dang cold and exposure. But there was only one huge rapid on the Wind River at that time. And as we came into it, Jim was rowing at the time, and we turned around to kind of major pile bow first and cut off the side. And one of these huge, all-enveloping waves came over the top of us, and just literally total blackness with the size of this wave, and then just crashed down on us. Ice cold water, and we'd just driven like 600 miles to get there. But from then on, the rapids there was really no major rapids of any kind. Some big stuff, but not anything of any technical problem that you couldn't go through. We were confident we could run the river the next day, but there were kayaks, and there was a couple of Klamath Falls boats, and lots of inner tubes and other kinds of people running that. But following the Wind River race, in which we placed fourth behind 2 kayaks that made it through if they could make it through the one rapid, we knew they'd make it. They'd beat us. and then the two guys rowing on a Klamath Falls boats, kind of like the dory boats. But on the way back from the Wind River to Casper and Jim down to Grand Junction and Johnny and myself back to college, Jim and I were talking on the way back about what would you do if there was an accident in the Grand Canyon? How would you get somebody out? Could you get somebody out in one day, or could you get somebody to medical help? Could you get them to Phantom Ranch or off the river? And we were kind of probably thinking we didn't really shine in the Wind River race. We placed fourth in that sort of a race. And that was, what, the 31st of May. And on this trip back, we just battered it back and forth as we drove along with an old Ford truck and a pickup, and beating our heads together about what to do. And we decided, hey, let's make a run down through the Grand Canyon and see if we can go through and see how fast we can go through the Grand Canyon. We didn't really set a goal of speed, but we kind of talked about 2 or 3 days. And I went back to finals. Jim went to Grand Junction. And as soon as I was through finals, we left natives. Oh my gosh, the problems we used to have. We always run out of gas. I mean, we run out of gas all the time. It's by the fact you carry it. But there's no place open in this country in the 50s, and nothing was open.
You rolling?
Start one more time.
Okay.
Anytime you want.
As mentioned, Johnny and I picked up the boat and headed on down across the Indian Reservation and towards Lee's Ferry, Marble Canyon. About 7 or so miles out of Marble Canyon, regrettably, we ran out of gas, which wasn't uncommon to do in those days, and I was finally able to hitchhike a ride on in. Now, this is early morning, like 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning. We ran out of gas, and no cars were on the road, of course.
Why do you say it wasn't uncommon to run out of gas in those days?
Well, because there's nothing open between Mexican Hat and Marble Canyon, and even that's shut down. And overnight, we were driving at night. This is about the second night we've been driving to get down there. We've been going 2 days, 2 nights, such a matter. By the time we pick up boats, pick up gear, and just to get down, there's a long, long trip. And anyway, I finally was able to get a ride by holding on to the light on the front of a car and sitting on the fender. I sat on the front fender, held on the headlight, and these people, because they didn't want me to sit in the car with them, they took me into Marble Canyon. Jim was there, and I thought I'd been shot when he jumped up behind me, and we got some gas, went out, got the truck, and got on down to Lee's Ferry. We finally left about 7:20 in the morning on June 9th, 1951. He'd called and told me what to get to take along, and I've got a list about this long of emergency supplies. I think like a piece of plywood, a screwdriver, a few screws, and of course peanut butter and jelly.
Do you have that list still?
Yes, I still have the original list.
Oh my God, you better hang on to that.
I still have the original list, and it's about 7 or 8 items that he said to get, from peanut butter and jelly to a screwdriver and some screws and a piece of plywood. That's about it. And sleeping bags. I think that was all we took. And we pulled off in the brisk morning and headed on down the river past Marston as I mentioned, at the inscription where Frank M. Brown was drowned. And we just kept going. We ran everything wide open, of course. It was fairly high water. Great run. We took turns. We drove about an hour and then switched. Each of us drove about an hour and switched. And whatever rapid was there, you ran. When we got to Hance, Jim and I had neither one of us run it. I think they'd lined both times with Neville's and us in 1950. So he ran Hance rapid, and we scooted past Phantom Ranch, and there was a train there. I mean, one of the mule trains going by, and we all waved at him and said we're on the run down through the canyon. Ran down through Horn Creek and such. We finally stopped at 107 and a half. It was in the granite, deep in the granite. We'd run a lot of rapids that day. We'd traveled a lot of long ways, and it was probably around 7:30 or 8 o'clock that night when we finally stopped. So we ran basically about 12 and a half hours on the 9th of June.
Now, and the water was...
I wish I knew exactly how high it was. We had that at one time, and I really thought it was closer to 60,000 than anything, but we can get that from the records.
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of cold. It was late in the day. We hadn't touched ground until that particular time. Hadn't stopped for anything. We rolled out the bedrolls and had a little bit of canned, I'm not even sure we had a piece of any canned food or not. I think all we had was just peanut butter probably. We might have had a canned tuna fish or something like that, or canned meat. It was pretty marginal. I know we didn't take any pots and pans. We couldn't have cooked. We didn't make a fire or anything. We just had a little bit to eat and laid down and went to bed. Woke up at the crack of dawn the next morning or whenever we could get everything moving, and we decided that the only place we had predetermined, actually, the only place that we were really going to stop was Lava Falls. We figured we were going to run everything else wide open, and we did. We went from 107.5 down to Lava Falls and stopped there and hiked up on as high as we could there and took a look at it. And of course, on the right side, this huge waves coming in there, which you see in lava at high water, just absolutely immense. And along the left side, coming off the bank, it had we gone down the second tongue out at high water, and we looked this one over and decided we'd hit the first tongue out from the shore, the first runnable tongue that looked passable at lava. And we piled back in the boat and ran lava. And from then on, I mean, it was just exciting. We went past Diamond Creek at about this time of night, actually. It was a little bit later, about 8 or 8:30. It was getting fairly dark. And we went on down through the gorge there, through 232 and the others down past Separation. And by then, it was really dark when we ran this stuff below Diamond. I mean, I say it was dusky, but it was more than dusk. You couldn't do anything except roll back from where the noise was, and that's kind of how we made that last hour into past Separation at 240. It was more of a roll away from the rocks and the noise, because that might be where the hazards are, and it was so black we couldn't tell. But anyway, we got past Separation, thought we recognized that, and from then on out, we just kept the boat going and kind of drifted on down to about the Bat Cave area. And it was about midnight or so when we finally pulled into shore. It was a lot of tamarisk and the big banks, and we had a little bit of a tough time doing it. We found enough of a space where we could pull up the boat, tie the boat up, get up on the bank, and we slept that night. And the next morning, we had good current all the way into Pierce Ferry, and we got in there probably, I don't know, 11 o'clock, something like that, 10:30, 11 o'clock, quite early. And Bill Belknap was there, came out to greet us and took some pictures of us. And Jim, being holding the air service, his Bonanza had been down there. I think they'd flown over us once, actually, during the Grand Canyon. I think they might have flown over and checked on us. But I'm not certain about that one.
Jim's guys.
Yeah, one of Jim's pilots. But I'm not sure he did, but they were down at Pierce's Ferry that morning, so they must have been planning on us being there, and we were. I like to think that we left Lee's Ferry at about 7:15 in the morning on the 9th, and we were past Diamond on the evening of the 10th, which we were by about 8 o'clock. And that's about the total time. And we made 2 stops, one for the overnight at 107, and the other to take a look at Lava Falls and run it. We ran it together. I consider the total run together. I was the one that actually handled the oars in lava, only because Jim had run it the year before when we retrieved the Esmeralda, and he said, I've already run lava. Bob, he said, you run lava. He said, I ran enhanced, you run lava. And as you know, we picked up the Esmeralda during the 1950 run and took it out, and he ran that all the way out.
And that was Doc Marston's.
Well, it belonged to Ed Hudson. Ed Hudson and Doc Marston had taken it down originally together as the first powerboat to the Grand Canyon. Then they, in 49, and they lost it in 50 because of a blown gasket and didn't know what to do with the engine because it wasn't working right.
P.T. Riley was on that trip.
P.T. Riley hiked in at Bright Angel and joined us at Bright Angel Creek for the lower half. He'd never been through the canyon within its entirety until that. He'd been on the upper half, as I recall, and he came on that one to pick up the lower half. I think that's the correct synopsis. And
boy, that must have been something.
It was exciting to find the Esmeralda. We didn't think that much about going through the Grand Canyon in the record time, and it just didn't seem like that much. There were people that wanted to interview us at Boulder City or someplace down there, and we got in the airplane and said, let's head for home. We got to go back and get to work or do whatever it was we're going to do. I guess we'll run some more rivers, because Frank Wright and Jim, who owned it at this time. Frank was on a San Juan trip, and I think he was a little bit upset when he found out we'd taken the Cataract boat and gone down the Grand Canyon, because he was probably scared that something, or concerned that something tragic might happen and it'd screw up the whole summer's, whether something happened to us, I'm sure that would be one of his thoughts too, but he was concerned about what it was going to do and how it might impact river running for that 1951 season. We had a Grand Canyon trip scheduled. We had some more San Juan trips scheduled. Tad Nichols had to come down the river and take some pictures for us and with us, and a lot of things going that were pressing, and I think Frank was a little bit concerned and upset. But irrespective, we got back, got boats retrieved and trucks, and went down and got the cataract boat, brought it back up, and we're on the rivers as scheduled. And it was a paradigm. It was the first time people run when we ran later on in '51. It was only the first time that anybody had ever made 2 trips down the Grand Canyon, and certainly the record time. It was the first time that all the rapids ever been run virtually wide open, except for the one at Lava Falls, the stop there. And I think you could talk about a lot of different records. I don't look at it as a record. I look at it as a fun experience and a great time.
Is it pretty vivid in your memory?
Very much, very, very much. It's very much vivid in my memory, and much more so than a lot of the commercial trips, which you kind of get all your passengers kind of become a morass and a molasses or an amalgam that you don't really sort out, except for the people that are some significance. The Tad Nichols, for instance, and others. You remember most of them quite well, but this particular trip, it's something that you remember Badger, you remember Soap right down the line, and you remember every one of them, and the water coming over the boulder, at the Boulder Narrows there, whatever it is, and the Harding being virtually covered up, and the sock dollarses and grapevines were chock full, and they're just wonderful rides. And Hanson Granite was an exciting thing, of course. Just really, really fun rides, and all through the gems, as we called them, just bang, 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 bang. We never took on much water in any rapid. We had some just great rides, and you might have you had to bail. I mean, you'd take on a few buckets of water every now and then, but there was nothing in there that I ever felt was dangerous or hazardous to us. As we went through lava, it was a very narrow chute, and I could feel rocks. And I said to Jim, he was laying down on the deck, just kind of propped himself up, laying on the deck, and I said, "Man, we're got rocks on the oars," and he said, "You're doing great." He said, "We're going the right way." Once you got into it, it's just nothing there. You just one of the narrow chute, rocks on this side and here that were covered, but you bang, bang your oars off them a couple times, and just boom, 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 and it's a very sharp drop along the left side, and we were down. And from then on, we were virtually totally confident as a boatman can be that you're home free. Boatmen don't get overly confident ever until you're back on the terra firma at the end of the trip. But I think we were as confident as we could be at that time, and started eating and started thinking and talking and shaking each other's hands and having a good time.
Yeah, not until you're back to the warehouse.
Yeah, then reality sets back in, and you got to go to work and start thinking about other things. It was just wonderful. So,
boy, it's amazing to try to visualize it.
We never looked at the river speed run as I don't know that it really ever gave us any quote unquote mileage from a commercial standpoint. I don't know that it did. I think we probably got more mileage just out of maybe the power boats as far as something different. But anyway, and I didn't think much about it. And of course, Kenton Grew has gone down faster than we did, and I think he deserves a great deal of credit and respect for what he did. It was different eras, of course, but it's still something that probably not going to be done again very soon.
Well, you know what those guys say, the amazing thing, and Kenton and Rudy both, they say, yeah, they did it, but both of them said it to me at different times. They said, well, we did this speed run, but the thing was they had done they probably had 50 or 60 trips apiece, under their belts. And you guys, that was how many?
Well, it was Jim's third trip and my second trip. We were veteran river runners. We were as veteran as river runners came, and Jim's very river wise. You don't forget rapids, you don't forget holes, you don't forget things. At least at that time, I forgot everything now, but at that time it was still pretty vivid. And from the 50 and run for me, and from the 49 and 50 for Jim, and we were as river-wise as anybody was. You know, it wasn't long after that that we had gone down 7 times, and I say this very humbly, and I think it was maybe on our 8th trip to the canyon, Jim came up and he said, well, you didn't know what this trip is to you, don't you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, congratulations, we passed Norm Neville's, and we had a number of trips through there.
Because that's what Neville's had before he
had
died.
7 trips before he was killed in the plane crash. And second, you know what this means, don't you? And so we did, and it really was humbling. He just didn't talk about it, but people thought we were crazy anyway for running the rivers. So, there was a little bit of blurps on the news about the fact that we done it in newspapers anyway, but nobody really understood what it meant, and we didn't either. We proved that you could get out at that time in that stage of water from any place in the river. I guess you could get to civilization. You get to Phantom Ranch if something happened. Jim kind of used that as an excuse. Well, tell Frank that. What if somebody breaks a leg or something like that? Well, at least we can get them out. We can run them down the river and get them out.
Well, because now.
He owns a lot of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And we knew something was wrong when he come down for the San Juan trip. And you hadn't showed up, and Jim hadn't showed up, and his emotions to himself, but you knew something was wrong. And he was quite upset.
Yeah, well, Frank didn't like it when we went down to the Speedway. He didn't like it when we built power boats.
Is that why he broke up with Jim, because of the power boats?
I think as much as anything, and he wanted to run the cataracts probably. And I like the cataracts personally. I really like the cataract boats because I felt I had more control of an oar than I did of a stupid machine that stops every now and then, or you can lose your rudder or lose your prop or something. Yeah, we had no problem on the power boats, but it just seemed like it's a mechanical thing that you really got a little bit less intimate with as far as the river and the water and the rocks are concerned.
Can you tell me one thing? What prompted you guys to build the power boats?
Well, as I mentioned, I think we're probably just boatmen are basically lazy, and Jim was he likes to run things. He likes to fly airplanes, or he likes to tinker with cars, and if you can put a key in it and turn it on and run it and push your foot on the gas pedal or turn the throttle, push the throttle up, that's a lot less work than going out and pitching hay and loading it by hand, which he had done as a young guy on the farm and ranch. I mean, he'd dug as much ditch as anybody and put as much hay up as anyone and rode after cattle. But it's just, it's tough life, and it's a lot easier to do it mechanically if you can do it with a tractor. Why use horses? He'd used them.
Now, okay, this is Tad Nichols joining us here. This is just for the... No, that's okay. You jump in whenever. So you guys grew up on a farm? I thought your dad was a doctor.
He was a physician, but he always had a ranch up in the Book Cliffs of Colorado, north of Grand Junction. He had a farm, and we were pretty good hay hands at one time, and pretty good ranch hands. And
so he made you work when you were kids.
We worked hard. Whether you're doctor's kids or not, we put in a lot of time on the peach orchard, the grape vineyards, and putting up hay and just punching cows and everything. We spent a lot of time in the hills and the mountains. Of course, Jim was drafted or enlisted in the service. Jim and Jack both enlisted in the service during the war. That deprived them of some of that later on, but Jim lived on the ranch, as did Jack, and they were good, hard workers. And we all did, even as young teenagers, young kids.
Did he go off to, this is World War II?
World War II.
Did he go off to war and stuff?
Yeah, both Jim and Jack spent a lot of time in the South Pacific, Okinawa, Guam, Philippines. Jim was in the Philippines and Okinawa. Jack was on Guadalcanal and Okinawa.
So they were getting shot at.
Yeah, they both saw a lot of action. One is that Jack was in the Marines, and Jim was in the 96th Infantry Division, and was eventually wounded in Okinawa, I think, and Jack was too. And Jim swore that he would never go back to war. We happened to be on the Glen Canyon in '50, and a guy came by with a portable radio and said that Truman had sent troops into Korea. And he said, "You're never going to war. You're never going to be in the infantry." And he'd already told me that before and taught me to fly. But he said, "I'll never go back to war." And he swore he'd live someplace in the Grand Canyon or the San Juan Canyon if it was necessary. But he was just there's a limit to how much you can spend in the South Pacific or in the Eastern Front or any place.
But he wasn't. It wasn't like Vietnam, was it?
No.
I mean, it wasn't. I mean,
No.
that was.
They came
seemed
back
like,
heroes like all the guys did.
Well, and that was something that you had to. That was
It
something
was a
that had to be
patriotic thing to
done.
do. They both enlisted. They both went in, and they're 17 years old, and that was just what you did.
And so when you made the speed run, how old were you and how old was Jim?
Jim, when we made the speed run, well, I'll have to figure out how old I was first. I was 20, so he was 26. He was 26 then.
And he ran Hanson. He let you run Lava because he'd run it before, one time.
He let me run Lava because he'd run Lava before, and he ran Hanson. I picked up Hanson, I think either that summer or that same trip. I think later on our commercial trip. But that way, we would have each run down a rapid, and we didn't know when we get a chance to run Lava again. Really didn't, you know. But anyway, that was a generous brother, a very generous brother. He missed one trip on one of our commercial trips, which gave me a chance to catch up with him as far as the number of trips we both went down. Don't ask me why, but he did it.
You mean you think he deliberately did it? Missed?
I've often wondered about it. But anyway, we ended up with the same number until I went down with Stavely in '65.
And this is for you too, Ted, just to switch gears a little bit. Has the routine changed a lot? Like as far as being on a commercial trip and stuff? Like what was it like to be on a Mexican Hat trip? I wanted to copy and give to the archives, to this Grand Canyon River Guides, to our oral history collection.
A whole bunch of people talking, and I tend to try to clam up sometime for fear that people think we're being BS in it, and so you just don't say anything sometimes. But in a situation like this, I can talk.
Well, if you don't mind, you know, I definitely want to transcribe this stuff and probably run a piece in the newsletter and all that stuff.
You just don't like to go out and pat yourself on the back for something you did.
Oh, you know, I tell you, I think this is something that it's great for us to live it vicariously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
See, I'll talk to people like yourselves who are river runners who understand and appreciate what we're talking about.
Oh, you know, it just slays me. I mean, and especially now getting to see this cataract boat on the water and stuff. I mean,
it's amazing. I can't get over some things myself. I really can't. I can't. You know, I think about flying Neville's plane on the 4th of July back to Grand Junction. The darn plane stopped about 2 months later, 3 months later, whatever it was. And it was one of the most beautiful flights I ever had in my life. They were leaving from Lee's Ferry up there. And I took off from the Marble Canyon dirt strip, which it was an old, real rackety thing. I'd gone out and done a few touch and goes the night before. Jim would take me up in the plane because I'd never flown it before. And just a superb plane. But, you know, as I took off the next day, and here they were getting ready to go down there on the canyon, it was just awesome. And you fly back up, no dams, no pollution, no plants. There wasn't an ounce of breath of air. It was so beautiful that morning in '49 flying back in Neville's plane. And you think about those kind of things, and the folks going down, and the families, and our friends and our families that have driven on the river.
Were you soloing the plane?
Pardon?
Was Jim with you?
No, I got my pilot's license in '48. I graduated from high school and got my pilot's license in '48, and that was because Jim said you don't want to go in the Air Force. You want to go in the Air Force if you got to go in the war. I said, but you don't want to go in the infantry. Yeah. And so I was only 17 years old, so I got my private license. That's good grief. That's 46 years ago, something like that. And we're still flying the same airplanes up in Alaska. The Cubs and the Super Cubs and the PA-11s and the Cessna 180s and well, of course, 180 came out in 53.
I was with Bob over flights over the Alaska glaciers.
Yeah.
Wonderful flights I've ever had.
We flew a bunch of glaciers down, didn't we? That was awesome.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. We'll catch it again sometime.